I don't know why. I don't know why I find myself resistant to Omega watches. It's not because I have a problem with large brands. I like a lot of large brands. It's not that I think Omega watches aren't worth the money. Omega watches, by some measure, you could say they're pretty reasonable for what they are and what they do. And it's definitely not that I don't like how the watches look. Case in point, this new Speedmaster 57 collection. This thing is... Look at this thing. So I keep digging into Omega watches, and maybe I'll get to the bottom of my hang-up, or at least I'll finally become a fan, and if this watch can't do it for me, I'm not sure any can. And there's only one reason you're seeing this video. It's because the awesome people at Exquisite Timepieces. Exquisite Timepieces has been around long enough that people who know watches know them. And I've already had people on Instagram telling me about their great experiences with Exquisite. They're not paying me, they just sent me this watch to look at, and look, I am. There's a lot to unpack here. A person could literally write a book centered on this watch. But I can't get into all that. NASA and Wally Schirra and Buzz Aldrin and his shapely bottom. I just don't have the time or the nerve, because Speedmaster people are a tough crowd, and nobody needs a comment section full of sentences that start with,
"So actually..."
But I can go back 10 years to 2013. That's when Omega first created the Speedmaster 57 collection. The whole idea was to celebrate the first ever Omega Speedmaster reference, the 2915, which came out in, that's right, 1957. In 2015, Omega slightly revised the 57, but it's this watch, the latest generation of the 57, that I think is the best 57 yet. For me. The latest Speedy 57 lists for $9,000 and has a few technical and aesthetic changes, I'll call them upgrades, starting with the size. The 2022 Speedmaster 57 is a millimeter smaller than previous 57s. It's now 40.5 millimeters across. It's also thinner. Omega says it's 12.99 millimeters thick. Come on, just say 13. It's 49 millimeters long and has 20 millimeter lugs. On the bracelet, the watch weighs about 130 grams, and it's water resistant to 50 meters. Actually, maybe now is a good time to go on a tangent. Welcome to Water Resistance, the internet's best and worst video segment dedicated to wristwatch water resistance. I'm always interested in what brands officially say about their own water resistance ratings. Sometimes watch brands are vague, and nearly all the time they're frustrating. For example, almost every time a watch is rated as having 30 meters of water resistance, it doesn't actually mean 30 meters of water. Which is why I was really damn surprised to see this on Omega's website. An Omega watch that is water resistant to 30 meters can be worn for swimming with vigorous movement at depths of up to 30 meters underwater for extended periods without restriction. The unambiguousness and the specificity of that statement, it makes me believe it. And when I shared this on Instagram as a story, a lot of people were equally surprised, and that includes one watchmaker who I know and trust and who is routinely trained and certified by Omega. He's been around long enough and he's seen enough that he just doesn't buy it. On the other hand, I heard from Robert Jan Brouwer, the founder of Fratello Watches and an Omega expert. He actually confirmed Omega's statement with Omega's VP of Product saying yes, 30 meters means 30 meters. And this is all in line with the Metas certification that I think all new Omega watches have. Omega says that during the testing, watches really are submerged in water and pressure tested for their listed water resistance rating. Omega could not be clearer about this, and yet it's still hard for me to believe, but I want to believe. So that means that this chronograph with 50 meters rating has more water resistance than I'll probably ever need. But it is important to know that Omega says chronographs should not be operated underwater. Pretty important asterisk there. On my 7-inch wrist, I think this is a great size. I could wear a 44mm Speedy or the older 41.5mm 57, but this one at 40.5, this feels like the best option yet. And it's not just the diameter that I like about this wearability, but the thickness and the weight. At 130 grams, this is actually pretty light for a steel chronograph, especially for being on a bracelet. And it's this bracelet, this is where I think a lot of the weight savings is happening. A lot of people refer to this style as a flat link bracelet. It's one that goes back to the original Speedmaster. It's light because it's thin and it's simple, but it's not without at least one trick. The clasp has something that Omega calls a comfort setting, which sounds like a euphemism for hospice care. It's just a simple adjustment system with 2 settings. It's nice. Actually, it's kind of disappointing. I'm glad it's here, but I wish there were more than 2 settings, and I really, really wish that it could be adjusted without taking the watch off. IWC and Glashütte Original, they know how to do that. And then there's the relative slimness of this watch. The 12.99mm is possible because this has a new manually wound movement. This is the caliber 9906. It's movements like this is the kind of thing I was talking about when I said Omega watches are worth the money in the illogical context of luxury watches. The caliber 9906 is anti-magnetic up to 15,000 Gauss. It has 60 hours of power reserve and is certified by Metas as a master chronometer. In this case, that means the watch will be accurate to at least 0 to plus 5 seconds per day. Unlike the original Speedmaster from 1957, this has 2 registers and a date, running seconds at 9 o'clock and both hours and minutes for the chronograph at 3 o'clock. This means that if you really wanted to, you could use the 3 o'clock register to track a second time zone, because it's basically just a little baby clock. But the fact that this is manually wound could make that not so convenient. And that's the same with the date. Dates on manually wound watches can be a pain, and maybe even more so because this doesn't really have a quick set date. The date is set with the jumping hour hand, which takes some time, but I guess this does have the benefit of letting you move the date both forward and backward. The hands are another improvement over the original 2013 Speedy 57, the broad arrow hand. And that's something Omega changed in 2015 with a small update to this line of watches, to be more historically accurate, I guess. And now that I say it, maybe that's where my hang-up with Omega is. Omega makes great watches that have their own value, and they really have nothing to do with the original 1957 Speedmaster or the Speedy Professional Moonwatch, except the name on the dial. I think Omega spends too much time making really tenuous connections to watches from its past. Too much time and too many watches. This watch, the 2022 Speedmaster 57, it's great on its own. It's better than the Inspiration in nearly every technical way, and it looks great too. The matte burgundy dial with the black chapter rings, the domed sapphire crystal, and the arabesque movement finishing. I like all of this. From what I can tell, the blue and green variants have sunray finishing on the dial, that's in contrast to this lightly textured maroon dial. And then there's the black dial with some heavy fake patina. The black dial is the only reference from the collection that does not have applied markers. It has what looks like a sandwich dial with that tan lume underneath, because again, that's what the old 2915 watches look like now. And I get it, people love a good story, but isn't a new great watch, isn't that enough of a story? This watch is a master chronometer made with all the latest and greatest innovations, with a 5-year warranty, and apparently you can take this down to 50 meters underwater. That's all enough of a story for me. Some people might like this watch because of the word Speedmaster on the dial, but I think I like it in spite of that. Thanks again to Exquisite Timepieces for making my silly little revelation possible.